Hello and welcome to the Overland Journal podcast. I am your host, Scott Brady, and I'm here with my co-host, Matt Scott, and we have a very special guest today, one of my closest personal friends, an extremely experienced photographer, director, videographer, and overlander, Bruce Dorn. Thanks so much.
It's Uncle Brucey.
Uncle Brucey in the house.
Exactly.
No, I prefer to be addressed as Uncle Zeusy.
So here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about somebody that's had, I think, one of the coolest lives of anybody that I know. Has taught me a lot, has taught a lot of people a lot of things, from humble beginnings to Hollywood, to racing, to, driving around the world with Expedition 7 with Scott and all the trips that we've done. Let's start in Indiana.
This content is brought to you by Overland Journal, our premium quality print publication. The magazine was founded in 2006 with the goal of providing independent equipment and vehicle reviews, along with the most stunning adventures and photography. We care deeply about the countries and cultures we visit and share our experiences freely with our readers. We also have zero advertorial policy and do not accept any advertiser compensation for our reviews. By subscribing to Overland Journal, you're helping to support our employee-owned and veteran-owned publication. Your support also provides resources and funding for content like you are watching or listening to right now. You can subscribe directly on our website at overlandjournal.com.
Born very close to the race day of the Indy 500.
I remember you saying that there was a particular engine. I know that Offenhauser had something to do with when those in particular were running, you could hear them from the speedway.
Yeah, we lived about 27 miles from the speedway as the crow flies. And when the Novi, the supercharged Novis were running, they did it even back then. I was born in 51, but as a kid in the 50s, I could hear them. They'd do 250 on the straights, and then you'd hear them just shut off and you knew somebody was frantically sawing away at a steering wheel, and then back down the backstretch. So, yeah, I sort of got methanol in my blood, from growing up near the home of motorsports.
Yeah, I mean, for those that don't know, 250 mile an hour in the 50s and 60s.
Insane.
They don't do any faster than that now.
Yeah.
On ridiculously narrow tires, bias ply tires.
Cojones.
Oh my gosh. And the roll bar came up to mid-back.
Yeah.
None of this nonsense of having it above your head.
Right. Yeah. Well, your spine's compressible to a certain extent.
Yeah.
I mean, at least from my perspective, motorsports has always been a common theme in the life of Bruce Dorn. You've always had cars, race cars, fast cars. I mean, growing up in Indianapolis, I think, I don't want to say that Indianapolis kind of gets maybe the cold shoulder these days, but it was for decades the center of motorsports in the world.
It was one of the stops on the Formula One circuit back in the day. I think in their corner at Le Mans, it's called Indianapolis. It's a hard 90-degree left-hander. One of the tracks has a corner called Indianapolis because Indy is a 2.5-mile oval that's basically 3 straightaways. It was always a big part of my life. Growing up there, I spent the summers on my grandmother's farm in southern Indiana, and there was a short track, a little dirt bull ring not too far away. And my grandmother worked at the concession stand. If you looked hungry, she'd fry up a chicken for you. And I stood outside turn 4, dodging the dirt clods. So didn't get to race early. Well, I raced motorcycles early. I started running Hare and Hound and motocross. Motocross was different then. Bikes had 3 inches of travel.
It was mostly your spine that was the suspension.
Which explains a lot. It explains a lot about my physical condition. But no, I started racing at about age 14.
Yeah, because you used to be about 6'8", right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And your legs were 100% of the suspension. But now ran, Husqvarna's, Hodakas, Bultacos. A lot of stuff. I mostly ran 125s because I just wasn't fast enough, quick enough for the really big fast stuff. But once in a while, ran a 400 2-stroke or something like that. The bikes back then, the throttle was like Satan's light switch. Yeah. It was all or nothing.
Yeah.
I still miss the smell of Castrol. maybe we snort some afterwards.
Yeah. I have 2 strokes in my garage.
Nice.
Oh, that's right. You do. Well, and I remember one of the stories that you talked about was, I think you were in New Zealand where you flipped a Mini about 80 times.
So I was on the U.S. team, Team USA 94-95 on TQ midgets. It's USAC.
Yeah.
The midget and the TQ series, 3/4 midget, goes back to the 1930s, I think. And actually, it was all midgets. Racing midgets does sound sort of
that's
socially
where Bruce and I
inappropriate.
really became friends, is we've both raced midgets in Indianapolis.
Yeah. And I know there's a more culturally appropriate way to say it.
They're just called sprint cars?
So the hierarchy was quarter midgets, which
is where I started at.
And then TQs.
Oh, we're going to talk about that.
Okay. So there was quarter midgets, which great big giant. And the reason he won is because you're long torsoed and you could plant your
I could put all of my weight.
Yeah,
towards
I saw you do that when we were racing up the go-karts up there in Vegas. Remember we were running with what's her name?
That was with Jesse Coombs.
Yeah. Quarter midgets, TQs, which were 750s. And then there were full midgets. And then there were Silver Crown cars, which were long wheelbase, sprint cars. And then Silver Crown, which were long wheelbase sprint cars. And then there were Gold Crown, which were Indy cars. You and I were both in the latter system to go to Indy, and neither of us quite made it. But I was on Team USA, went down to New Zealand to race against the Kiwis and the Aussies. And I think I used my last motor up, but with 3 or 4 races go in the 6-week series, and I got 4th in the series. So I was running good.
Yeah.
I was running good. Yeah, opening. So our cars went down ahead of us. I got on a 21-hour flight down there and didn't have any Ambien, so I didn't sleep a wink. We got off the airplane. The guys from the local TQ club met us, and they said, "Which ones are your gear bags?" "Oh, this one." "Start putting on your fire suits." They drove us directly to the track, put us on a podium out in the middle of the track, shot off fireworks, and our cars were idling and ready to go. So, I was going, wait a minute, So, and because we were the Yanks, and supposedly we had some, advantage, they started us in the back, and we ran 4 main events a night. So 4 30-lap features a night. And we ran about 3 nights a week, I guess it was. Opening night, I think I ran from dead last up to maybe 3rd. And then in the second race, still, they didn't move us up any. I was passing guys. And I remember just trying to squeak by this guy on the outside on the front straight, and I ran up his back wheel. It turned out it was the white flag lap, and I was passing the leader. I just passed guys. I don't know where I'm at. And I just snap rolled it a whole bunch of times. And it was just like sky ground. And the crotch belt was like really getting my attention. And then I'm doing like this, and I'm feeling the crotch belt, is not so tight. The shoulders are tight and the engine's running wide open. I go, oh yeah. And I take my foot off the gas. Just as some track worker comes in, the car was upside down on the cage. He undoes my belts and I go straight down onto my head. Right. And the G-forces actually, my vision went dark. That's when I did a bunch of tears in my retina, which 4 or 5 years later fully detached. But I remember I get out of the car, and you know how when the guy gets tackled, and he's woozy, he always stands up and waves to the crowd. So I'm waving to the crowd, and one of the guys grabs me by the shoulders and turns me around. I was waving at the darkness, and the crowd was over here. So instantly they loved me. I was that guy. I go back to the pits, and my vision is dark. It was like suddenly I had on 6 stops of neutral density. And I'm kind of looking, and I noticed that they're working on my car, and I'm going, they're sending me back out. And they were circulating, and they were holding a position for me up like 2nd row, something like that, waving me up there. I'm going, no, because I knew that the car wasn't set up. They just threw parts at it.
Right.
So I went to the back, got up there. I don't know if I won it or not, but I ran really good. We ended up touring the island. We were on the South Island racing, Ruapuna, Greymouth, but a wonderful experience, except when we ran into the bees. That's another story, but there was a whole problem with honeybees and a third world windshield that shattered. And then we ran into a whole lot of bees.
Is that where you gave me the advice when I went to New Zealand to get the windshield insurance?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We got to stop these
I
side
didn't
trips.
get the windshield insurance.
Well, we didn't either. And it was Boxing Day and the windshield shattered. I was in the back seat behind the driver. I see the windshield spider web. And then, thank God I had on sunglasses. There was not safety glass. We all got a million shards in our face and a lot of bees because the beehives were over here and the marigold field was over here. And we drove right through, sort of a super highway of bees. And we spent the next 6 hours getting stung, by stuff that found its way down into our pants. It was pretty special, but I really enjoyed that. Yeah. So Team USA, go Team USA.
Yeah. So let's go back to Indy. I think one of the interesting things where we first crossed paths, but we didn't know, was you started talking about shooting the Indy Mile.
Yeah.
Well, we used to run at the little racetrack.
You were in that. Yeah, you were in that little swimming pool.
The little swimming pool at like age 5, turning left and pulling 3 Gs.
I was there to shoot. Well, actually, I was actually there when Kenny Roberts ran the TZ 750, that 2-stroke bike that he rode once, and I watched him work in a groove on the outside and come from the back to win that race. It was unbelievable. I went back there to revisit that spot and actually document where that dirt clod hit me in the nuts at 140 miles an hour, And then I went over to turn 2 because the sun was setting down the backstretch, and I was right by.
Yeah, it was right by turn 2
by the little track. And I watched some guys in there, and I think it was 2.5 seconds a lap.
Unbelievable.
It was
unbelievable.
Something.
And these kids,
I want to say it's closer to 4, but
that was in your era. This is when I was out there more recently, when they were quick. But you'd see them set up and do slide jobs and everything, and it's just like watching a race like this.
Yeah,
beautiful. I admired quarter midgets when I was growing up, and a couple of my grade school buddies raced them. And, they'd have them on the table in the basement, little tiny.
It was a fully suspended race car that a 5-year-old could drive.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Sounds perfect.
So you learned a lot about car control, and you learned how things reacted, and you learned stagger, and you learned weight jack, and you learned everything.
You weren't in the Sleepy Trip era, were you? Did you ever? Because he started in quarter midgets, and he got his nickname Sleepy, a big time midget and sprint car guy, because he'd fall asleep. He's so relaxed that when they were setting up the starting grid, they'd have to wake him up.
Oh, I would for sure fall asleep. There's pictures that my dad has of me sitting ready to race, falling asleep, and then slaps me on the helmet, wake up, picks the thing up, runs with it, drops it, because that's how you'd start it. And then hopefully by then you'd be fully awake. I think that was pretty common for 5 and 6-year-olds that were being made to race at 10 p.m.
My buddy Eli and I are thinking about building a quarter midget and just finding some kid. Yeah, just find a kid.
Talk to my dad. We still have all the parts.
So it was fun. When I started racing, I had started to do really well in Hollywood. So when I started to race, you got to have cubic money and just be prepared to throw it in a check shredder. And at one point, I think I was racing in 7 divisions and had a full race shop and some guys that maintained the cars.
Sponsoring a Formula Atlantic car too.
That's right. I sponsored a Formula Atlantic.
But let's go back. I'm going to stop you there. I'm going to stop you from talking about racing. Let's go back to Mademoiselle magazine and Condé Nast.
Yeah, that's such a great story.
Age 20, 21?
No, gosh. So between my sophomore and junior year.
At Heron Design School?
Junior and senior year. Yeah. So I would have been just 20, 21, something like that.
Yeah. This is really where you kind of spread your wings and fly.
So
fly, Brucey.
I had picked up photography when my brother-in-law loaned me a camera for this summer trip. Going to art school with the intention of being an illustrator or graphic designer. There was a minor in photography available, and of course I was going to do that. I was dating a girl that worked at the mall. I was working at a Texaco station, and I was doing oil changes and lube jobs and all that. And we were kind of running out of common stuff to talk about. I was over at the magazine stand buying some car magazines, and the women's interest magazines were here. I picked up a magazine. It fell open to call for entries for college competition. Bought the magazine, went home, read it up, applied. It was a protracted process. You had to do a whole bunch of creative projects, and it was a whole series of questionnaire questions. They were clearly focused on women. This competition went back to the 1930s as the Condé Nast College Board, and they'd pick 12 students from around the nation. There was no social media. You couldn't tell what kids were thinking. You couldn't tell what the up-and-comers were interested in. And they had long since created this college board. So They had never had a guy enter it before. So all the questions were aimed toward women. And I just went crazy on that, because I was, can you type? One finger each hand. A shorthand? No, both normal length. It's the other side. And I drew a picture around my hand. They found me mildly amusing, sent a junior fashion editor out to check to see if I was a total creep or not. And I ended up winning the guest art directorship. So first time ever on an airplane was to Manhattan to check into the Biltmore to start work on Monday. And that first week, they sent me to Reykjavik to art direct a sweaters shoot with Arthur Elgort, Ansel Elgort's dad, the guy that's the star of Baby Driver.
Wow.
His dad was a photographer I art directed. I went from Reykjavik to Paris and shot Kenzo, Betsy Johnson, I forget which collections. And then I went to Rome and shot out runway on the Spanish Steps. So I went from literally from Friday at the Texaco to the following Friday, I was seeing supermodels changing clothes backstage, know, and I was
heckin' big jump.
I was digging the fashion industry pretty quick, Yeah,
didn't you say that you went to some champagne estate?
Yeah. So everybody, because we were representative of all college students, and they just happened to have, actually another guy entered that year, and he was guest fiction editor. So there were 2 of us and then 10 girls, and they wanted to entertain you and pick your brains. So Levi's put on a big show for us, Cointreau, Dom Perignon. We went to the Dom Perignon vineyards, at the family estate. And
I mean, the first time you drink champagne probably is not only Dom Perignon, but it's in Champagne, France.
Yes.
At the Dom Perignon estate.
Oh, yeah. So I always had on a Caterpillar hat, a cat diesel hat, and jeans, and my hair was about as long as it is now. I went to makeovers. They had makeovers for the girls, and they didn't know what to do with me. So, by the way, I am a summer in terms of my complexion, and Clinique worked me over and had my hair cut by some high-end hair cutter. It was surreal.
Yeah, Bruce, what's fun is because I've heard most of these stories, and first of all, they remain the same stories, which means that there's a high probability that they're accurate. True. And then I've also heard a bunch of people repeat them with the same degree of accuracy. But one of the things that I remember from this trip that you did to Europe that stuck out to me was that there was this older gentleman that happened to be in Europe. And I think it's an important lesson about having mentors in our life. So would you mind sharing that?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. I was crushing on 3 sisters back in Indianapolis. One of the girls was in one of my art classes, and she had an older sister and a younger sister. And their dad was a lovely fella, and he wanted me to photograph all the girls for some portraits of them at that age for the wall. I think he secretly kind of wanted to have a son. I had a good relationship with him. I put that on the side. I fly over to Europe. I'm checking into the hotel the first night in Paris and running into my first snarky Parisian desk clerk.
Sure.
And I'm checking in, and he goes, Monsieur Dorn, and he hands me an envelope that was, in the box for me along with my key. And it was a sealed envelope. And I tear it open, and it's a note from the father of these girls. And he says, I'm in Paris. I want to take you out to dinner tonight. He was a patent lawyer. He was actually, the company he worked for was the guys that created powder coating.
Okay.
So electrostatic paint baking. And he went around the world suing people that were messing around with that. So he picks me up. We go out to dinner. I mean, I had never seen so many forks. I had never seen so many spoons. I had never seen so many glasses. And he very gently, without humiliating me, worked me through the process of how you behave like a gentleman. I'm paying very close attention, and I'm also pretty mesmerized because just beyond him was an older guy that had hair like I have, and he was surrounded by supermodels, and he was delicately eating a Caesar salad 1 leaf at a time while the girls all flittered around. And I was going, I like this guy, and I really like that guy too. I got some sort of brick and mortar ways to behave from the father of my gal pals. And then I sort of got a goal for where I wanted to go in terms of being a wacky old artist. You know?
And you achieved both.
I'm trying to fulfill that destiny.
Somehow. I think the thing that I like about that story and appreciated you sharing it was that we often all need that person. when we go to a new country and we have a chance to spend time with someone that's local, ask them the things that you can do to best, respect their culture, and maybe do some research ahead of time. So I think that experience that you had, not only was it very beneficial for you, but based upon how I've known you, is that you have spent a lifetime doing the same for others and mentoring others. And I want to get into mentoring with you a little bit later in the conversation, but that's such a great story.
I'm a big pay it forward guy. My dad worked his butt off to support his family, and I didn't see him a whole lot. I really would have liked to have had the experience growing up, going fishing with your dad and doing this and that with your dad. You got to spend a lot of time with your dad.
Spent a lot of time with my dad.
Racing and stuff. Where I grew up, there was a father of girls on one side and a father of girls on the other side, and they both kind of liked having a boy around, especially one that was enthusiastic about stuff. So I got some really great guidance from those guys. And then I have run into people all my life. I'm going to call them benevolent adult males, who would just notice that I was trying or that I had some potential. And a number of occasions, my life's direction has changed because somebody noticed and bothered to give me a bit of guidance. So absolutely, I've always tried to do that. I take great pleasure in it.
Well, and Bruce, you've done that for me. You've done that for Matt. I can think back even within moments of meeting you, you were already freely giving
unsolicited advice.
That's right. But things we needed to hear.
That's why we're talking the other day about an AI app, Uncle Brucey, that offers you advice.
Yeah, exactly.
We just have to save Bruce's mind into AI.
Ask Mr. Knew-It-All.
Let's go from gallivanting around Europe and Mademoiselle magazine. You're back in Indiana.
Yeah.
You decide not right.
The
second time you get on a plane is to move into a studio apartment off of Fifth Avenue.
No, not a studio, my friend.
A penthouse.
Penthouse loft on Fifth Avenue. Yeah, I had a nice gig with a local department, with a Midwest department store chain that I came back to after the experience with Condé Nast. But it was, that was really, how are you going to keep them down on the farm after they've seen Paris,
Yeah, for sure.
So at the first opportunity, I joined a fledgling glam rock band that was going to try to make it in New York. And it was the glam rock era, and I helped them with promotion and staging. And we lived in a 4,000 square foot penthouse loft, and they didn't want the front. I had the Fifth Avenue front view. I built a wonderful darkroom and a rehearsal hall in the back. I was the only one that knew how to use a hammer and a nail. We renovated that loft. We sanded down the floors. It had been a button factory. It was in the garment district. I remember my life was sleep until 4 p.m. or 3 p.m, run around the fashion magazines and get an assignment, and then stay up all night. All the little fashion editors and all the beautiful people. Our loft was one of the stops on their deal. New York Dolls would come over. We'd go to Max's Kansas City and CBGB's and Andy Warhol's loft.
You've been to Andy Warhol's loft?
Of course. Jeez, come on.
All right, moving on.
Come on.
It's like, do we dare ask for any Andy Warhol? Andy Warhol stories.
It's like Elton John, always with copy in my glasses, always. Yeah, no, so I was living the nightlife thing there, and it was pretty fabulous. They got the band to the point that they were going to sign for a TV, kind of a follow-up to the Monkees, which is going to resonate with no one. That's a reference from way back. They wanted to do another variation on this band was going to be it. Don Kirshner recognized that's the drummer, that's the bass player, that's the lead guitarist, that's the rhythm guitarist. And who are you? Oh, we don't need you. So everybody got signed into a multi-year contract where they gave up some ludicrous percentage of what they'd make for the rest of their lives. And I didn't. And thank Buddha, because I was able to go my own way, and they got stuck. Even if they were doing paper routes, they still had to get some commissions. I had a really great time in New York. And then I guess I should mention that when I won the guest editorship, I had applied to Missoula, and I was going to go get my master's degree. I had gotten a bachelor's degree. I was going to go to Missoula, and I think I was going to be going to study jewelry making for my master's, and I wanted to be a smoke jumper. So I was going up there to do that, and it was going to go to National Outdoor Leadership School that summer, and then I was going to go to Missoula, and I thought, I'll be a smoke jumper. And instead, I was a fashion photographer in New York, Paris, and Rome. Who knows how it would have gone the other way.
And at what point in time did you study typesetting? Because you even studied that at some point in time. Because you've given us, Overland Journal, a lot of the typeface that we use is because of you.
So yeah, my degree, I thought I'd be an illustrator, and it was a very interesting program I went through. It was the old world master and apprentice kind of a program was in effect, and that was being sort of changed over to the new conceptual kind of free associative art. I was in a program called Visual Communications, which had typography, 3D design, 2D design. We built fine art furniture. We did color theory. I understand the Bauhaus theories of design and so on. And yeah, typography is about as pure design as you can do. The most important thing that came out of that really was, the school, we in just about 300 students would go into the sophomore program and about 22 would graduate. It was before schools survived by being diploma mills. Mm-hmm. So if you got through it, you for sure got an education and you for sure had an opportunity for a job. They hired all the 3D designers out of this school to go to Detroit to do clay modeling for Body by Fisher, or, before there was CG, there was clay.
Well, there's still clay in automotive design. I remember when we went to the Land Rover Design Center, there's still.
It was amazing.
It's real hands-on stuff.
The creative process.
And, I think I had shared with you that I was accepted to Art Center. I was going to get a full ride at Art Center to do automotive design, but I was poor and I had to work. I wouldn't be able to eat or buy gasoline to get to school. And they had a mandate that you couldn't work. You had to dedicate yourself 100% to your studies. So I had to walk away from Art Center in Pasadena and ended up at a local fine art institution that I'm glad I had that education. I'll fight anybody that says that going to college is worthless, because it was really worthwhile for me. No illustration, although I can draw. I'm pretty good at that. The application of that is limited.
In fact, you have a bunch of your art going into the next issue of the magazine. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, if this breaks before the next issue of the magazine comes out, that'll make perfect sense. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Actually, I did those in conjunction with one of my students from back then, a fellow that was in when I taught. So I guess I should mention that I ended up teaching at the university level full time for about 5 years, and still very close to a lot of students. Yeah, yep. After doing that stint in New York, was drifting west, just wanted to get out of Manhattan. I loved that experience, but I'm a little bit more of an outdoorsman, and Central Park wasn't quite enough. On my way west, I stopped off in Indianapolis to see some friends, and I was offered a sabbatical position, and that turned into a full-time position until about 1980, when I headed further west.
And you ended up in Phoenix.
Yep. I was married to a gal, and she got a job as a creative director at a new agency in Phoenix. It was Gray Advertising, I believe. And there was a note on the refrigerator, "Move to Phoenix, come on out." And I was still in the middle of a teaching contract. So I was a bachelor for a minute, more than a minute. And then I didn't re-sign my next contract, and I joined her in Phoenix. And then sat around watching a lot of cartoons.
You've seen Phoenix change. Holy cow.
Oh, yeah.
Phoenix in the 80s would be unrecognizable.
No 101, no 51 freeway. It was just this straight grid of streets where you could get killed at every left turn intersection. A horrible place to own a motorcycle because there are no corners.
Is that where you got run over by a guy on a bicycle? You've had a lot of close calls with bicycles.
I got run over by a guy on a bicycle with you when we were in Amsterdam. Oh, no, that was the one you're referring to was when I was coming out of a photo lab in Hollywood, and a guy on a mountain bike, a big, burly West Hollywood guy, hit me like a ton of bricks. I mean, look at me. Me flying through the air means there's a lot of inertia involved.
That's right, momentum.
But I remember looking down at this guy and, wham. And then he comes over, "Oh, mister, are you okay?" And then he realizes he just may have injured a guy. And so then I have this other vision of him with the potato chip front wheel trying to run away on this mountain bike. But
didn't you end up like through a plate glass and on top of a pool table? That was something different.
Yeah, that was on my normal commute to work. I had a 400 Honda F with a beautiful little 4-cylinder that would run about 11,000 RPM. And I had this one set of corners Well, that corner was the one where I was sitting at the traffic light with my arms folded, and I saw Buick Skylark logo right here. Car landed on my front wheel, and I flew through the air. I never unfolded my arms. I just landed on my head. And I woke up, and a big biker guy picked me up, threw me in the back of his truck. My Honda was already in there, and he drove me home. The one you're talking about was that same intersection. I had this series of corners. And the night before, it had rained, and somehow somebody had dumped a bunch of transmission fluid, and there was a nice river of slickness across the road. So I low-sided the bike between oncoming traffic. It went up the handicapped ramp. No, it hit the curb and started doing the ragdoll. I went up the handicapped ramp onto the wet lawn and through the plate glass window and onto the pool table of the drug halfway house. and the drug halfway guys were very annoyed that I was bleeding on their felt pool table. And then they go, "Oh, biker, what you got?" And then they saw I was on Honda, and they go, "Oh." So yeah. I have an endless stream of crash stories, but yeah. I do need triggers to remember. But yeah, that one was pretty special.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about Phoenix, and then let's talk about Brucey going to Hollywood.
Phoenix, I figured it out pretty quick. I was my rent was nothing. I had my studio.
You said it was like $350 a month for your big studio. Commercial studio.
Yeah, well, it wasn't that huge, but it was adequate. It was downtown. And then I lived in the Squaw Peak Lodge. I think my housing was all in for studio and home was $450 a month. Okay. I was pulling down $125,000 a year, working a day a month, And the rest of the time I was either running dirt bikes, crashing and breaking my back on dirt bikes, or racing Hobie Cats, or skiing at Telluride, or running three-wheelers in the dunes.
Oh, yeah. Oh, favorite story.
Yeah, these are all true stories. You're not being punked. This is not April 1st.
No.
You got to tell the story.
So you're there in Glamis.
So they invented these three-wheelers. You remember those diabolical three-wheelers? The very first ones had no suspension.
Did they end up banning them, or did they just stop making them because they were getting sued too much?
I think enough lawsuits. Yeah, I think there were lawsuits.
Your legs would go underneath them and you would die.
Yeah, it was like a wishbone where that's what happened when I broke my back. My legs both went under both wheels, and it kind of made a wish. No, before that, Honda came out with the CR 250. So it was a 250 motocross bike, two-stroke, in this nice little compact three-wheeler. And they were fun. You just slide them and you could bicycle them, do whatever you want. They were only dangerous if you were an idiot and didn't know how to slide and, a flat tracker. So we were having a blast. So a buddy and I had them, and we got them, and it was during the wrong time of the season to go over to the Yuma Dunes. It was hot because it was too early, or hot because it was too late. I don't remember, but
it was hot.
It was hot, and there was nobody there. And we were very excited. We just picked them up from the Honda dealership, threw them in the back of we had a trailer, and I had one of those Toyotas that everybody wants, the little SR5.
Solid axle, yeah.
Solid SR5, long bed, single cab, four-wheel drive.
Yeah.
22R.
Yeah, perfect.
Slug slow. Anyway, we race out to Yuma, and we get off to this place where we used to always run dune buggies, and we unload them, and we got an hour, before it gets dark. Hell with it, we're going. And we're roosting out there, and we knew our way around, and we were heading to the Bowl of Death. It was the highest sand, and at the bottom there was a circle about the size of a paper plate that was the hard pack of the desert floor. But other than that, it was just this astonishing deep bowl, and once you got in it, you had to kind of get out of it this way. There was no
tornado you way out or whatever.
Yeah, a reverse toilet flush. And so I come up to that roost over the edges, and I double take because there's a flippin' flying saucer hovering down there about 20 feet off the ground. And my momentum carried me around, and I come back around, and
this is where we start talking about how aliens are real, and we've seen them.
It's there. Well, this is the story I always do when anybody says, "Anybody ever see an alien?" But I'm doing the and I wave my buddy over, and I get him to stop, and we marine crawl over and peek over the edge, And we studied that thing for a while, and it was floating in the air down there.
It was big.
It was substantial. But it was weird because it kind of looked like an ironclad. It kind of looked, I don't know if anybody even learns this stuff anymore, but it looked like the Monitor and the Merrimack, kind of the Civil War era, but a spaceship.
The first metal.
It was like Jules Verne flipping thing. And we're watching it and listening for sounds and seeing no activity. And finally we got up to the balls to go down there. We go down, and we were getting closer and closer to it, and it was even more and more scary because here this thing is.
And there's no tire tracks. There's
nothing. It was just hovering down there. Where would you hide if you were a spaceship? Hide in a dune bowl. It'd be perfect. But we get down there, and then I see that there in the center, there was a switchback staircase, and it was built on a bunch of telephone poles. And it was Jabba the Hutt's Sand Cruiser. And that movie was being made, and they had finished the shoots. Every day at the end of the day, they would come in with, I learned later, they'd come in with a helicopter and blow all the tracks out.
Yeah, sure.
And so we climbed all over that thing. It had the trap door for the sand.
The tentacly kill you.
Yeah. And I mean, I knew a little bit about showbiz and props and things like that. And the scenic painting on it was astonishing. They had dressed in sand at the base of it to hide all of it. You really had to be in the right position to be able to see that it was a prop.
Wow.
We climbed all over that thing, and then we were wanting to bring some folks back to it, and it was gone. Yeah. It was gone.
Hey, man, I see this spaceship in the desert.
And then
check it out.
A couple of years later, here came Star Wars. There was the time I built a two-story house out in the middle of those same dunes and put in a bluegrass lawn, and it was for Scott's Turf Builder or something. And I remember seeing this desert bird fly over, and he does this same kind of double take I did, and he lands and he's rolling around on the grass and chirping and everything. And I'm going, bro, go get your friends, And we were out of there in a couple of hours. And I just imagined him going, no, I swear it was right here. Bluegrass. It was right here.
Kentucky bluegrass.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Brought in several flatbed trailers of Kentucky bluegrass, which turned to bacon in about an hour and a half because the sun just completely destroyed it. But I digress. That was one of the many, many fun ones.
So let's just imagine you riding that little three-wheeler all the way to Hollywood, and let's transition to there.
No, the way I got to Hollywood was in my Persian sand-colored 1960 Cadillac convertible, which was some kind of a magnet. I'm trying to remember what kind of a magnet it was. I was very popular when I drove Sunset Strip with the top down on that thing. Yeah, sure. I remember I'd be sitting at a traffic light and the suspension would gently settle, and I'd look back and there'd be three young ladies that had decided to hop in. I recommend a 1960 Cadillac
for any scenario
in Persian sand, which is code for metallic pink. And I drove it with the gangster lean steering it like this.
I hear all these stories of people like having cars and then ladies being attracted to them, but the only people who talk to me about my cars are guys.
Yeah, well, see.
I mean, you don't look like Bruce.
Some people can ruin even the sexiest car. What can I say? Now, leave the Porsches alone, would you please? Just leave them alone.
I am the Porsche people my dad warned me about.
The move to Hollywood came out of the blue. I went from having nothing to do in Phoenix to developing the Arizona Phoenix Art Directors Club, and got a lot of work. My kind of photography was different. They did a lot of tabletop and large format, and I was more loose handheld and, sort of lifestyle kind of stuff. Started shooting motion picture stuff there. Worked for another guy who was a producer, director, and he needed a cameraman. I said yes. Recurring theme in my life is to say yes, even if I shouldn't. And then figuring out how to make that yes turn out okay. Did a few spots, started my own production company, ended up in the Clio Awards, which is kind of like the Tonys, Emmys.
It's a big deal.
Commercials. Yeah. And so I was in the finals for I forget what category it was in, but I was up against the biggest special effects house in the world, and with my little tiny.
You said it was like $1 million budget versus a $25,000 budget.
Yeah, and then my stuff, if it needed a set, I built it. If it needed hand talent to pour beer, I'd get a manicure and pour the beer, and I did everything I could possibly do. Anyway, I was up against them. I'm pretty sure they beat me. Within a few weeks of the award ceremony, I got a phone call from the big effects house, and they wanted me to come over and interview. So I flew over, 55-minute flight, had an interview. They offered me a job, an independent contractor job.
And this was Robert Abel and Associates, which is a big deal if you look at them. I mean, they were like the pioneering motion graphics special effects house.
Yeah, it was Industrial Light and Magic and Digital Productions and Robert Abel. And ILM was the ILM guys, Industrial Light and Magic guys, were kind of specializing in feature stuff because it was George Lucas and Lucasfilm. We were doing commercials, and Robert Abel and Associates really couldn't do couldn't bid the big jobs because they didn't have any directors. They had a ton of really talented special effects people or graphics people. That's where I met Mara. She's in the history books for her work that she did at Robert Abels as a designer. And
wasn't she somehow involved with the Beam Me Up Scotty?
Yeah, she did,
which is amazing.
Yeah, she did the wormhole sequences and that hyperspace thing. That's my wife. Yeah, she's literally in the history book for her.
Yeah, we should have had her and something.
She's better. She's a lot better. And she would be here telling you, you can hear her eye rolls from here because I'm telling stories. I told one not too long ago that she had never heard, which I saw her
That's
do
the
this
only
big
lie
double
you've
take.
ever told.
Well, it was a really cool place to work. I went in there and I figured out special effects pretty quick because I'm a mechanic, right? Number one, I was a mechanic. Number two, I was a designer artist. And so here's this confluence of cameras and logical thinking, We invented the first motion control camera there where the camera shoots and moves and shoots and moves. And we also did, and I'm saying we because as a company, I was kind of around the edges, but I remember advising the computer guys when they were doing the first mocap suit, like in that guy, Andy Serkis, who does Gollum and the monkeys in Planet of the Apes and everything. They were trying to figure out how to not have to use a classic Disney cell-flop animator to do animal locomotion. They were trying to figure out how to shortcut actually having a proper illustrator. So I had taken drafting in high school. I knew you could describe any object with 3 angles, front view, top view, and side view. So we took these old Mitchell Rockover cameras that were used to document the nuclear tests in
Roswell.
We put a Geiger counter on them, and they were it went off the charts. So I mean, we were putting
from Bikini Atoll.
Yeah, they were half a 50 million year half life, and we're putting our eyes on them all day long, and it would fog the film. We're going, why is the film fogged? Because you're putting it you're putting it in a radioactive box, front view, top view, and side view. And we went down to the office store and got those little Avery dots like you'd use to put on file folders, red one for this, green one for that. Put one on every joint and then have the 3 cameras shoot it and then play that stuff back and physically track the elements. And then you could create a skeleton on which you could, a hierarchical animation upon which you could skin. You could then put fur or texture or so on. And then we had to figure out how to light stuff. And because I had a little bit of knowledge in all these areas, I was handy. There were people that were mathematicians that were standing at blackboards, whiteboards, just working out the original vector graphics and then raster graphics. And that was all coming from there. They were doing something similar at ILM. I went from doing some little tiny jobs to doing the biggest clients on earth.
Yeah.
It was like going from the Texaco station to Reykjavik, but now I'm going from small town production to biggest budgets there ever were. It was the 80s. And, I was doing Super Bowl spots and I launched the C4 Corvette.
I didn't know about that one.
Turbo Mustang, Thunderbird Turbo Coupe. Yeah. And not all of them was I director on, but either,
involved,
either I became creative director of the company. And so any job that came in, and I think it was the visual communications and the brainstorming and free association. That's kind of what I would like to be doing going forward with the AI is kind of teach creative thinking, Yeah. Because there's a lot of stuff that comes natural to me. I'll look at something, I'll go, but a lot of people just can't prime that pump, And there are technologies and systemologies that can allow you to kickstart a idle brain.
Well, let's unpack that a little bit. Like if someone's listening and they want to be more creative or they want to come up with new or original ideas or better ideas, what are some of the basics that you use to do that?
Is this the mind expanding drugs portion of the podcast?
Brainstorming, free association, and synectics. Synectics is one of my areas that I think is really interesting. And you can jump on the bot and read up on them because what I could tell you now could be done, in the next hour, 12 seconds for a bot to go into. But there are ways to break down a problem by analyzing. It's just like the answer is always in the question, right? Mm-hmm. So if you can properly ideate and articulate to yourself what it is you're trying to do, then within that, there are actually systemologies that can allow you to fire it up. And it's just kind of like priming a pump. A dry hand pump will never do anything unless you pour a little something in it. Synectics in particular, you take keywords and then you elaborate from that. But I think it'd be easier to just kind of research that stuff. I spent 4 or 5 years full-time teaching, I taught visual communications and all levels of photography. In the process of doing that, there was no syllabus. They just dumped me in there. And so I sort of created my own way of teaching. And anybody in an art school was generally the best artist in their high school. And it's just like being the tallest kid in your high school. You're going to play basketball. You're the tallest kid. You're going to play volleyball or basketball. You're the artistic kid. You're going to be an artist. But they're never challenged and they're never taught. High school art, middle school, grade school art, you're the one that can handle staying within the lines or going outside the lines, whichever is sort of appropriate, and you have a sensibility for color. To then actually study that stuff and be challenged. So anybody that came in there was, whatever they produced the first semester was average, and then from there on they had to grow, because I had a high school art teacher that did that to me. I mean, I was always the best with the crayons or the pencil or the airbrush or whatever. And he just shut me down. He just goes, C. I go, what a minute, I've never gotten anything less than an A+. Yeah, but that's average for you. So you got to impress me. You got to improve. And that got me off my ass, honestly, And that's what I try to do in mentoring is, number one, well, when I was teaching, I'd always try to identify the strength of the particular student. And then I would try to force multiply that, because you can try to jam a square peg into a round hole, but it's better to just really make it a more precise fit in the round hole, So whenever I'm mentoring or when I went from what I learned teaching made me really good at running a film set. As a director, it's a benevolent dictatorship. It's your vision. Everybody is there to execute. But everyone in that room is the best at what they do, or they don't make it to that set. You can either work with them or you can struggle against them. And one of the things I learned when I was teaching was to listen, watch, and learn, and then figure out the best way to move everything forward. So on my sets, I appreciated what the makeup artist had to say. I appreciated what the key grip had to say. I made the decisions, but the fact that I respected all the players made us all sort of elevate the game. Never had more joy and fulfillment than running a set, being out in the middle of somewhere, getting ready to shoot at dawn, and you got 20 grip trucks and caterers and all this. And I'm going, I cannot believe they're paying me to do this.
Sure.
But yeah, a lot of automotive, a lot of special effects, every category. It was just, I was in the right place at the right time,
And it's that kind of recurring theme of the love for education, the love for mentoring, seems to have been the next phase, as we continue to unwrap the onion. It's the next phase of Brucey's life.
I don't think you ever learn anything as much as when you have to explain it to somebody else.
Yeah.
I was not prepared to teach. I don't have a teaching degree. I couldn't teach high school or grade school, but I was able to be a college professor, or not a professor, lecturer. You got to really earn a professorship. I'm DGA director.
Directors Guild of America, for those that don't know.
So to be an assistant director, you have to go through layers and layers of education, and you have to understand all of these things. But as a director, you just have to come in there with a vision and somebody who's backing that vision. I would never qualify to be an assistant director or a production manager. Maybe I would, because I've been around them so much and I learned from everybody I work with. Over and over again, it's been a combination of confidence and accrued experiences that allowed me to just step into the highest level of something. My life's not been just like this rocket sled ride to the top. I've had plenty of backsliding and all that stuff. When an opportunity has come up to be in charge, I grab that, And when I have a bunch of people to work with, I look at them as assets. I'm not going to just push them around. I want to harness and direct all that stuff. Robert Abel and Associates was really like this. It was really great. We were doing all the best clients, and I was shooting 270 days out of the year, and I cut a pretty good day rate. My day rate had a lot of zeros in it. And then I participated in the markup on the jobs, and more importantly, I benefited when I would bring a job in under budget. That was unheard of. When I cut my deal, nobody had ever heard of a director who would come in under budget. But I'm the kind of person that
you've told me about the angry South African that would wreck the Porsche and just go hang out on a boat, where you were kind of like, you know what, I'm going to work for this. I was the guy in Phoenix that would bring things under budget.
Yeah.
I'll take less money, but I want to cut.
Yeah. So I have no business degree, and certainly anybody in the commercial arts, you make your money from the commercial side of the arts. a talent, and $8 will get you a small latte. I guess I have a fair amount of street smarts, you know. I think of myself as a problem solver, and some guys in my capacity just go, oh, we got $3 million, $6 million to do this. They spend it all. What I try to do is figure out the smartest way to do it and come away with a lot of profit. Yeah. Now, I don't leave any production value on the table. I get it on the screen. I had to build the inside of a spaceship one time. It was like whatever this name of the spaceship is in Aliens. That's sort of real gritty looking, you know, working spaceship. I had to do that for some Tyco commercial or something. The budget for the set was $750,000 because it's, you know, had to have this really spectacular set. I got a scout and found a defunct hydro dam up in British Columbia, and I run it for $600, and I put a bunch of Christmas tree lights all over it in the background out of focus, and got all those dynamos painted up and everything. I think I spent $5,000 out of that $750,000 on the set, and the client was just, this is awesome, you know. Yeah, problem solving and doing that kind of stuff. I was doing that at Robert Abel and Associates one day. A bit of drama happened, and some fishermen came in. Yeah. I was an independent contractor, but the guy owned the company represented me as an employee and created an annual report that was not exactly honest, and sold me like a football player to another league. But you were a free agent. Yeah, that deal couldn't go down. A bunch of stuff happened. They were very surprised that they weren't buying me, and everybody went away mad. And I opened Bruce Dorn Films the next day and took all the clients that were suddenly abandoned. Robert Abel and Associates, a lot of people scattered to the wind. I opened Bruce Dorn Films out of my producer's garage, and then found a space, and then bought a building in Hollywood and proceeded from there. I had really good fortune with finding good people who like to work with me. A number of people who have worked with me have won Academy Awards and multiple Academy Awards going on to work in long form. I never went into long form. I regret it to a degree, but I also didn't spend my life on 3 movies. You know, I did a lot of interesting and different stuff, and I was around a bit for my kids growing up. Yeah, so I was doing all that stuff up until I had a big physical surprise. I was racing a lot. I had a lot of race cars in a lot of different divisions, and I was sitting in a race car and my legs went numb. I thought the belts were too tight. We were waiting to go on the track, starting the engines, killing them. The race that was on the track before us was having a lot of accidents, so we were sitting in the staging and just in there, and I'm feeling my legs go numb, the kind of 10,000 needles kind of thing when you sleep wrong on your arm and you lose the blood circulation. Well, that didn't go away. So I was, the guys had to put a tie down strap under my arms. I won the race with my foot like clubs. I somehow still managed to have enough throttle control. I won the race, but the guys had to pull me out of the car and I couldn't stand up. So that lasted for quite a while. And I had to, in the business of being an it girl, an it boy doing creative stuff, they call you say yes. And the day you can't say yes, they have to get someone else, and they go back to that someone else. So I had to say no to an awful lot of people, and that sort of killed my momentum. Ultimately, after tons and tons of tests, thinking I had late onset MS and all this stuff, it turned out that at some point, and I had my insurance would not cover anything if it was motorsports related. And I had some wheels fail, and I hit the wall, drove straight into the wall at 120 a couple of times, and so I had some pretty solid whiplash and maybe concussions. But I'm going to the doctor, and he's going, what's wrong with you? I'm describing what's wrong. He goes, well, what have you? I go, well, I fall off ladders a lot, and I snap my head forward like this when I fall off those ladders. I have making up stories. Eventually, after multiple spinal taps and trips into the scanners and all that stuff, one of the guys goes, do you work near a generator? Do you work near a gasoline generator? And I go, I do. On the weekends, I spend all weekend next to a really big gasoline generator. It was kind of carbon monoxide poisoning was the last thing. They were looking at heavy metals build up in my system and stuff. But while we were still screwing around trying to figure it out, my legs kind of came back. But then it was reinvention time. I was doing a lot of teaching myself computer skills, because you got to keep going.
And that was when you were starting to do the Corel stuff?
Yeah, Corel Painter, Photoshop, and...
How do you describe Corel Painter? I vaguely remember it.
They call it a mark making program. And basically you can make brushes. You can replicate an oil brush and a scumble and all of these kinds of stuff that relate to a natural media brush. They have a handful of brushes, but then you can design your own. So it's not a push a button thing. You're using a stylus like a Wacom stylus, and you stroke by stroke render. So it's as much time as doing an oil painting or a watercolor, but no paint drying time.
Yeah.
And you can hit an undo button, but I avoided the undo button. Like a traditional painter, if you paint yourself in the corner, paint yourself out of the corner, I approached it as a guy who had nothing better to do, and I became one of the earliest painter masters, and I was at that time considered to be one of the best in the world in international competitions against the Chinese and the Russians and all that. Did neoclassical looking ballet imagery and motorsport, airbrushy looking stuff. Won the Kodak Innovators Award, which is, that was funny.
Kodak was a company that made film.
They were big at one point, back when the cameras, when you put something in the camera.
For anybody my age.
But that's funny. Mara had actually, my wife Mara, I was introduced to Corel because my wife was messing around with it. And I go, what are you doing there? And she goes, go away, leave me alone, stop looking. And I go, no, seriously. She goes, no, seriously. And I go, well, at least tell me what it is, Corel. So we're working on it separately. And I don't know how it was that we came to enter the Kodak Innovators Award. But one day the phone rang and Mara picks it up and she's increasingly excited. And she goes, I won the Kodak Innovators Award, and rubbing my face in it and dancing around and everything. The phone rang again. And it was the only year they gave it to two people, and they had no idea that we were related, let alone married. So after she had rubbed my nose in it really severely, I went, sorry. Sorry. It was, since I moved here, I was doing a lot of different kind of stuff, Western imagery and so on. I was awarded a artist in residency with the Idle George Museum, and I showed alongside Ansel Adams. I entered this is a big Western art competition that happens here on Memorial Day weekend, the Phippen Museum and Western Art Magazine show on the town square. I entered that once and won it. So I was actually licensing imagery. This is some of the stuff I was doing before we stumbled into each other.
Yeah, that's right.
And so I was.
How did you guys meet?
It was
what dating app was it?
Grindr. Grindr. Yeah.
I won't explain that one.
Yeah. You have to explain that one? Come on, man. Nice try. No, Scotty called one day wanting some advice on some camera gear. I was actually designed a line of camera equipment.
That's right.
And at one point we had 300 part numbers that I had designed, and I won some industrial design awards, and it was kind of good for a while. And Scotty called and was talking about it, and we realized we were in the same town. I mean,
yeah, it was crazy.
I mean, yeah. So then we went.
Yeah, it was just the coolest looking follow focus out there. It was very robust and minimalist, which we needed for being in the field. And next thing you know.
It was like when the Honda, this may be another reference nobody understands, but when the Honda Goldwing came out, it was this Porsche style flat six water cooled
engine.
Yeah, a boxer engine and a motorcycle, and it was spectacular. And then some of the people started designing saddlebags and windscreens and everything, and it was the platform of choice. And then Honda created all that stuff and put all of these accessory companies out of business. My accessory company, which I designed, I was a preferred vendor for Panasonic, Sony, Canon, and Nikon. And Sony actually approached me to design some components for them, which is pretty interesting because normally with the Japanese company, it's not invented here, forget it. Yeah, I was doing all this stuff, and then they just created their own versions, or they added features to the camera that made my stuff irrelevant. So that was another arc of doing something kind of fun. We had some coffee, I think, and then you were getting ready to do the original,
the loneliest
place.
Yeah, that's right.
That was over Thanksgiving. You said, "I'm not going to sit and watch football. I never do." And I said, "I got sons-in-law who I don't really like, and they're going to sit at my house and watch football. Can I come with you?"
That's right. That's exactly what I think. You had about 2 days' notice.
Oh, and I didn't know we were going on an actual get out of the car thing. I was, as usual, in the wrong clothes. And I remember when we stopped at Flagstaff, I bought a liter water bottle just because I thought it was cool. And then next thing you know, we're marching up the 58-mile bench.
50-mile bench, yeah.
I thought we were going to just go for a drive. And then we didn't quite have to make a snow cave, but we were huddled under a rock ledge.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, that was such a fun trip, trying to get to the most remote point.
And in the lower 48 states. Did a similar trip, I guess, taking an EV to a similar spot.
I did. So when Bruce and I did this trip with Cam from Nemo and Ray Highland and everybody, the goal was to actually get to the physical location that was the most remote, which included hiking for many miles. But what we recently did was we took an EV to the most remote point that you can access on a dirt road in the lower 48, which is in the same area, just slightly different location.
I remember when we were doing the original trip, and that's 10 years ago,
right?
That's
right.
Yeah, I realized I was the oldest guy by 20 years, and I figured it's going to take them extra time to get my corpse out of here. So I just volunteered to do everything first, like the rappelling and the jumaring and all that. Because that was a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
I do have some great photos of you rappelling.
Do you think that rappelling artist made my butt look big? Be honest. Be honest.
You were fantastic,
yes.
Bruce. Yeah. You were fantastic. So that started some, and you had Jeeps and you'd done a lot of off-road driving and dirt driving and riding and everything else like that, but not combining that with travel really.
Well, and not having chums, that's the thing about the overlanding community versus having a 4-wheel drive and driving it around the mall and all that stuff. It's super valuable to me. I mean, obviously that chance meeting, we then led to the opportunity for me to join you on Expedition 7.
That's where the bromance really started.
That's right.
That was the big spoon, little spoon moment.
It was. Yeah, we spent 4 years sleeping together.
Yeah, not quite joking when we say we spent more time sleeping with each other than with our wives. And he is incredibly snuggly. I just want to go on record as saying that.
I'm a snuggly guy. Yeah.
And the most annoying thing is that he'll trick me into telling the story just so he'll fall asleep. I have a way of putting people to sleep.
I didn't do that.
And then the way
Bruce, tell me the story about the Playboy model again.
No, it'd be about how the carburetor float bowl works. And then this sweet, gentle snoring. But yeah, no, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, don't peg the snoring just on Scott. I was on a brief portion of that trip too. Y'all both snore like chainsaws.
We need to put into this podcast
like very large, like industrial chainsaws.
Yes.
I mean, maybe early industrial age locomotives.
Yeah. Something just post steam.
Yeah.
I think we do have to put in the YouTube video Matt actually asleep with his fingers still on the laptop trying to write while we were driving across the United States.
Well, my favorite picture of Matt, and I probably still have it, was we were up in Vegas for the car show or whatever it is. And those guys that used to stand outside the convention center with the porn.
I love collecting those. I'm always trying to find one that says Laura. That's my wife's name, and I've never found one.
Well, I got all of them. And then Matt was asleep, and I just poured them on him in the bed. And
that was the Liberace mansion.
That's the place. That's the place.
That's right. Yeah, that was the weirdest place we ever rented. It was like a 10,000 square foot.
Now think hard. The weirdest, let me think.
Back when SEMA wasn't just rebranded Chinese things.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, we did. We drove Alaska. We drove across the U.S. together on E7.
We stopped in New York for a minute.
That's right. We did.
The feather boa moment.
Yeah, we have that can go in the show notes as well.
Boa.
We got Bruce.
It's the only time that I will ever have a feather boa on my hand while eating a hot dog next to the commissioner of the NBA and the owner of the Utah Jazz.
People were
interesting.
I'm not going to name names, but people were messing with me on the trip across the U.S. And so I arranged for a trap in New York. Well, first I arranged to have all the police officers' personal vehicles towed from in front of B&H. So we had some 80 feet of parking.
Try to make that happen in New York City.
Yeah. And then because I was the one who theoretically knew his way around Manhattan because I had lived there, I happened to have in the Bruce Dorn Girlfriend Network, which is widespread.
Yeah, you haven't even mentioned the GFN.
Yeah.
BDGFN.
Called up one of the members of the local chapter of the BDGFN and had hers curbside somewhere in Midtown. with a pink cowboy hat that I think fit Greg Miller. And I had one. I had one and it had a diamond tiara built into it because Greg had tried to get me one in a truck stop somewhere in Colorado, and they were all children's sizes. So I called ahead and made sure I had one. And then this girl, I got us down the street, ambushed us, put on my properly fitting hat, and wrapped Greg in a pink feather boa, which emotionally overwhelmed him for a moment. And then from then on, the pink feather boa was either punishment or a reward.
It was for the rest of the trip.
And weren't some of the feathers plucked to make some flies?
I think so.
Some fly fishing flies.
Exactly.
I wonder whatever happened to the pink feather.
There is some sadness. That's probably one of the great losses of Expedition 7. We actually lost the pink feather boa somewhere, probably in Russia. I don't know. But
probably in Russia. Either that or on the ferry. Maybe one of my girlfriends on the ferry got it.
So this is a story that has to be told. So Bruce and I were traveling through Europe with Expedition 7. We arrive at Nordkap in these Land Cruisers, and Greg Miller and I are standing up and underneath the art Atlas. Installation Atlas holding up the world at Nordkap, and we're getting all these photos thinking that we're looking cool. And then Bruce is like, "Hey, I want a photo too." So I grab my camera, and it's totally socked in with fog. And Bruce stands up there, and this is an absolutely true story. So Bruce is up there in all of his Arctic gear and his green glasses. And out of the fog, this woman is running. She's running through the fog. I mean, you hear it. You hear the crunch, crunch, crunch. And I turn and I look, and this woman runs out of the fog, and she is wearing a fleece jacket, the exact same color as Bruce's glasses.
Yeah.
She runs up the steps. She hugs Bruce and kisses Bruce. She turns and looks and smiles for the photograph, which we'll put in the video. And then she runs back into the fog. She said no words to Bruce or anyone. She ran out of the fog, kissed him, hugged him, smiled for the photo, and then ran back into the fog.
That sure messed with the rest of the guys on the tour.
Nobody could figure it out. Then we used that to our advantage for the rest of the adventure for sure.
One of my favorites was when we got on the Oceanic ferry.
Yeah,
and I tricked
from Stockholm to Tallinn in Estonia.
It was you and I were in line first. We're waiting for the ticket booth to open to get on the ferry with all the semis and all this stuff. And the rest of the E7 guys are behind us. And they're getting ready to open up the booth. And I see there's obviously a senior kind of guy there and a really attractive young woman who seemed like she might have been in training. And they finally opened the window, and it's on my side, and Scotty's driving on the right, and I'm going, would you mind helping me with a little joke? She goes, what? I said, so the last time you saw me was in the lift line at Aspen, and I ditched you. I ditched you for another chick, and you're really happy to see me, but you're also pissed, And so I said, could you just play that up when we drive away? And as we drove away, I could hear her saying to her boss, that was Brucey. That's and I go, ha ha ha. That was fun. That was the beginning of it. Apparently, it was after we got through there, and
she radioed ahead.
She radioed ahead, and every woman that worked on the ship, the ones that have the flashlights doing this, they go, "Hey, Brucey," as I go by, and the whole rest of the team, as we're walking up our way through the ship, we went by a bar, and one of them handed me a gin and tonic.
That's right. She turned and said, "Brucey, here's your drink of choice." Or something, and handed you a gin and tonic.
I just went, "Thanks, babe," and we went on. And all the rest of them are going,
was shocked.
What the heck? And I'm going, BDGFN, man.
Yeah, they're everywhere. They're everywhere.
By the way, all women you're the head of your local branch. I've got stationery and stuff. Just reach out.
Speaking of that, where can people follow you so they can become an indoctrinated member of the Bruce Dorn GoFriend Network?
I have a website, and that's all stupid. I'm on.
BruceDorn.com.
Yeah, but I never updated it. It's a million years old. I'm on the gram, and I tried to get Bruce.Dorn and somebody got it. And so I got Dorn.Bruce. And then later I remembered I had gotten Bruce.
You did.
Dorn
yeah, you have both of them.
Yeah, I know. I totally forgot about the Bruce.Dorn. So I only put stuff on Dorn.Bruce, but I'm going to go back and put some other stuff.
You can swap them and keep your audience. I can help you with that.
You are magical.
I know. I hear that often.
Magical Matt.
Yeah.
Well, so I've got some questions because I think people that are listening must have many, many questions right now. But one of the ones that I like, one of the things that I love about you is the fact that you do say yes to opportunities in your life. How do you determine what to say yes to?
I say yes to everything.
Everything.
Yeah. And then let it sort of
I have some money. The no was subtle there.
I figure the universe is trying, right? I mean, stuff comes along and especially stuff that I try to have a general knowledge about a little bit of everything, and I'm interested in everything. And so I figure I can always say no later, If an opportunity presents itself, I think that's the universe saying, pay attention to this. So I do. And more often than not, it turns out well. I think there's something I refer to as the persistence of the river. You can take buckets of water out of the river all day long, and you don't really change its course. I think that our trajectories are kind of. I don't want to be all about it, but I kind of feel like you pick positivity. Positivity, and for the most part, things go well. It's like I'm not saying fake it till you make it, but I am saying if you see an opportunity, deserve it. Do the work to deserve it. And that's served me extremely well. It still does. I mean, I'm 50. This marks 50 years as a full-time creative, and I continue to be astonished that stuff comes my way. I got nothing better to do, right? This is fantastic. And I also make a point of trying not to be stuck in my generation. In fact,
you've done a great job of that.
I don't know too many people my age, and most of the ones I do, they don't do that much. And if I wake up, I'm gonna get out there and do something, And I love being around younger people, and I love annoying them, and that's kind of a normal thing.
We were having lunch the other day, and it was just before I turned the big 50.
Oh, yeah.
And you just kind of turned to me, and we've spent a lot of time together, and you just said, Scott, every decade just gets better. And you said, I'm not so sure about the 70s yet, but it was, to me, it was really thoughtful to say, because when you're looking at, I did turn 50 just in the last few weeks, but to hear someone that I respect and admire say, you know what, it's like it just got better and better. No doubt things get different, but when I look at your life, that you like your 60s are like most people would be lucky to live an entire life doing. So that was good advice.
Going back to that thing where I was be standing out there in the dark in the sand dunes with all the grip trucks and everything and just going, I cannot believe this. I cannot believe it. Be grateful. The more grateful you are, the more the universe smiles on you.
Yeah.
I really think so. I would certainly love to be younger and have the physicality and the energy that I had, but I didn't have, I'm not going to say wisdom. I'm going to say I didn't have the accrual of experiences at the younger age. Thank goodness I had energy and physicality, because that compensated for the lack of common sense and experience.
Sure.
So now guile and what was it? Guile,
old age and treachery.
Yeah. No, I heavily depend on that now.
Am I supposed to ask him a question or something?
If you want to.
I don't really want to.
Okay.
I don't want you to.
Have you gotten on to second beer, Matt?
Man, I've been on the second beer for a while.
Oh, you have? That's nice. And Bruce is still on his first glass of water.
I'm sampling Pabst Blue Ribbon and Modelo today. I have an affinity for cheap beer.
Yeah.
Cheap beer, fine wines.
That's kind of your new, you need to turn that into a website.
your logo.
Yeah. I'm a juxtaposed person.
So here we are, beginning of 23. I was kind of wrapping up 22, thinking, time to slow down a little bit, maybe do a little more of the grandkids stuff and that kind of thing. And 23.
You just had a big announcement just that we could probably time.
So
we can time it with that.
Yeah.
You want to tell everybody?
Well, Canon brought me on as an explorer of light.
Yeah, we didn't even talk anything about Canon, and that's been a huge part of the last decade of your life.
Yeah, I was when I was doing my digital art stuff, doing the painting and so on. I was doing, the big trade shows. I would get a room with 500 people in it, and I would do live demos. I'd bring in a model, and I'd light it, and I'd shoot it, and then I'd use that as reference to do a digital painting, and then I would output it in 90 minutes. So I was really fast. Normally you do this stuff rather slowly. But I invited the guy that was head guy at Canon at the time, Canon USA guy. I went over, I said, I'm doing a show. I'd love it if you came and caught it. And at that time, they were just starting to push the pigment jet printers. Inkjet printers suck. Pigment jet or giclée printers are actually, for the simplest explanation would be, it's like acrylic paint, tiny micro paintballs. So a proper pigment jet print will outlast the Mona Lisa, in terms of the color fastness. And they needed cool looking stuff to promote that. He created a program on the spot with me and another guy called the Print Masters. And I joined Canon's rank as a print master. And then they put me on the road teaching the wonders of maintaining your, all of our digital stuff can go, in one sort of electronic burst.
Cody bits. Yeah.
And so the only thing that really is going to outlast you would be if you do make prints, a magazine will be there, but electronic footprint's going to be gone. The formats will change. I was in, and then I was the only person. So the Explorers of Light program was one of the very first sponsored artist program, and they took a lot of pride in the fact that they located the best in a particular genre. And if they used Canon, then great. They would approach them to become an Explorer of Light. And as they'd go, this is the best underwater guy in the world, and he uses Canon. And they never threw equipment at people and said, you're super good, use our stuff, and then, we'll brag about you. They moved me over into that program, and I'm a general practitioner. I don't specialize in aerials. I don't specialize in high fashion. I've done a little bit of everything. So I'm kind of an odd fit in the program, but because I'm also a cinematographer, done as much or more cinematography as I have still work, that made me the right guy at the right time when the first HD SLRs came out. You had film cameras and you had digital cameras, and that was the whole thing. And then there was suddenly...
And then the 5D happened.
The 5D happened.
Changed everything.
And that's when I started my parts manufacturing. I was doing 26 city tours talking about doing, how to use this stuff for cinema. I think it was ILM that reached out to me one time when they were doing Red Tails, the story of the African-American Mustang squadron.
Tuskegee Airmen. Tuskegee, Alabama.
And they needed to be able to film inside the cockpits of these P-51s, and I was a consultant on that. So I was inducted into the Explorers of Light 18 years ago. Every year you requalify. They were all fired at the end of the year, and then they rejigger the group so that it's the best, supposedly. You don't know if you qualify until about mid-January. They announce the new stable. And every year I've made that cut. Certainly the nature of social media sponsored artists has changed dramatically. Everybody has
it's more about the following these days.
And it certainly is a big component.
It's a big component.
It's a big and legitimate component. I'm not going to say it isn't. I've always felt that my responsibility was to build followings for my customers, for my clients. Who cares if anybody knows who I am or recognizes my name or gives a hoot about my opinion? So I have very few social media followers. I don't, but I feel responsible for a lot of the followers of some pretty big name companies. This year, they have decided that I'm a legend. So they moved me into the legend program.
You are a legend, Brucey.
Yeah, right. So they have another program, which is, I don't know if I've been kicked into the attic, but it's got some pretty big name people in it. And I'm humbled and thrilled that they have moved me into that. I'm in it for life now, so actually beyond life. So I'll always be in the Canon Legend program. So
yeah, that's fantastic, cool. Bruce, and so deserved, man. It's just amazing.
Well, more importantly, they said, and we're sick of you not doing projects. I haven't done anything really cool for them in a while because they have to spread it around among all the people that they bring in, the fresh horses, so to speak. But I'm getting ready to go out and do some really good work for them.
It'll be amazing to see what you come up with.
Very exciting. Yeah, very exciting. I'm chuffed, as the Brits would say. I got a big assignment to go make a camera look awesome. It is an awesome camera. I'm thrilled to be it's like having a Kentucky Derby capable winning horse, and they called the oldest jockey in in the world to ride it. I couldn't be more excited. And all my mentees are doing great. I've spent a lot of time trying to help people, and every time they have a victory, it's a victory for me. So
yeah. If you were to ask something of our audience, how can our audience support some of the mentorship work that you're doing? Or is there a challenge that you have for the audience around that? Because you've made a difference in so many people's lives.
Well, we were talking before about trying to sort of magnify that or increase it. And I had the sort of the conceptual name Elevate One. You don't know everything in the world. I don't know everything there is to know about everything, but I know something, and there's somebody that's one rung down on the ladder from me. And I don't care how new you are at your art form, your writing, your music, your image making. You're somewhere, and there's someone else who could use benefit from your wisdom.
Yeah.
At every level. So elevate one. Find one person, elevate them.
Yeah.
A rising tide raises all boats. I love it. And I absolutely guarantee you will understand what you do much better when you have to explain it. When you have to make someone else understand it thoroughly is when you understand it thoroughly.
Yeah.
You know what my passion is now. I want to get this Heroes Network idea going.
Yep.
The next thing I've written for you is a pretty heavy piece of writing, but it led me to an idea about trying to organize our community into being there. Being there. And I don't know whether we want to talk about that now or talk about it more later, but
I think once we get it off the ground a little bit more, but the next couple issues of Overland Journal, Bruce has the opportunity or had the opportunity to share a story of Vasilisa, who was viciously attacked in South America. And it's just an awareness that we have within overlanding that things are not always safe, and that there's a way for us as a community to be supportive when someone needs it, or someone is fearful of their safety, or someone has had a compromise to their safety. So
we're all, a big part of the adventure community is that we're all individuals, and we all want to have our little individual adventures, but there's so much more we can share. We don't have to turn it into a homogenized cookie cutter type of thing to be out there exploring the world. And for women to be able to go out there and have adventures and be strong and fulfill all their potential, and we just need to make the world a little safer. Yeah. So I've got a cautionary tale, and the takeaway on it is very positive, but it's really easy to fool ourselves into thinking that everything is sort of prepackaged and safe. We know better. We get out there and
there's almost an attitude with travelers that if they say something isn't safe, it means that they're not worthy, or they're not part of the club. Like they don't want to.
You don't have to be reckless to be a traveler.
Yeah, it does trend towards that reckless thing.
Whenever I see the tagline, and I never felt a moment, I never felt that I was in danger for a moment. I'm going, then your situational awareness is not quite finely tuned. I would never want to talk anybody out of, risk and danger is a seasoning to some degree.
And we can never fully escape it, even in our day-to-day life.
No matter how gorgeous the shot is of you out there in the middle of nowhere, you're out there in the middle of nowhere. And I feel like there's an opportunity for us to, as a community, share information. This area is not quite so good right now. Maybe it's a little sketchy. Maybe you could caravan through this area. Maybe you could sidestep this area. I want to organize us to be on-call Good Samaritans, you know?
And there's so many people in the community that would always help. You know, I mean, from everybody that we've
part of the joy of travel
in the overland world.
It is a community, and part of the
kinship.
Part of the community isn't just going down to the pitch-in dinner and everybody's watching the skyrockets. You got to be there when the tornado comes in.
Yeah, sure.
And I think we could I'm not going to say do a better job of it, do a job of it. Yeah. I mean, I feel like. I know from the story that will appear in the journal that my friend was caught in a terrible situation, and then what was worse, she had no one to turn to.
Yeah.
And I don't know, but every particle of my being is absolutely sure that there was somebody from our community within a couple hundred miles.
Yeah.
There's somebody in our community within a couple hundred miles of all of us.
There's probably somebody within a couple miles. Yeah. There's only so many routes, right, that most people go on.
I don't know how you could find any place on earth where there isn't somebody in the overland community kind of nearby. And if we had a way to be able to send up a flare and call in the cavalry to be there when somebody is absolutely in need and has no one to turn to, because a big part of being solo is being solo, and a big part of being out there in the middle of nowhere is you're in the middle of nowhere. There aren't emergency services,
Oftentimes.
And so I think it will be a small but big thing to organize us into a community that is on call.
Yep.
I mean, how many times have we seen it? Somebody busts an axle on the White Rim Trail or they're out of water and everybody, but we need to have that for those of us who actually find ourselves in a vulnerable position.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of times when not plenty of times, but there are those odd occasions when it can go so horribly wrong that you can barely cope. And, we can fix that.
Yeah. Or at least community can be present to help.
Yeah.
And be a support.
Yeah.
And get a mechanism for that. So, let's plan on having a future podcast where we talk in more detail. We are working on it. Bruce has got an incredible idea and has done a lot of effort to flesh it out, and he's pulled a bunch of people together.
And now you're committed to it. We've talked about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I'm tenacious. I will.
And treacherous.
Tenacious, all the T words. Tall. That's really the thing.
T-Rex.
Yeah. But it just kind of goes along with trying to stay involved. The more you stay involved, the more that you choose the positive, the better things go.
Yeah.
So
it seems like it. Yeah. Choose the positive path. Well, we could spend another 2 hours talking to Bruce. Well, actually, I spent 4 years traveling around the world with Bruce, and I never ran out of Bruce stories. So hopefully we'll get you back on for some more. Bruce, I just, as a friend, I am so grateful that I called you that one day in Prescott, and that we've been able to have this decades-long friendship. You've taught me so much, and I've learned so much about life and about travel and about being thoughtful of others from you. It's just been an incredible joy, Bruce, to have you as a friend. So
I'm going to get all sappy-eyed. Yeah. But, it flips around, right? When you develop a deep friendship, everybody benefits. And I've learned from both of you guys. I've learned from Matt to pick better beer primarily, but
there's nothing wrong with a good, solid Midwestern beer. Please sponsor me.
That's right.
Pabst Blue Ribbon.
That's right.
Here's your chance.
Let's see if it's a Canon Explorer, it would be a Pabst Lush.
Yeah, Lush Legend.
I think we could come up with a marketing campaign and take it to them.
Yeah.
They've
got to come to me.
Have I taught you nothing, Matt?
Have
I taught you nothing?
Followers.
You've got to attack.
You've taught me a lot, Bruce.
Take
so
the
much,
beer and attack.
More than I think you'd know, and I don't think that I would be in the position I am in life without you. So I deeply care about you.
Gosh, what a love fest.
Yeah.
Let's do this again.
Well, screw you. I'm done.
Like right away. Don't stop.
All right. So you can find out more about Bruce at dorn.bruce.
Yeah. Don't go to Bruce.
Or bruce.dorn, because you also have that. I'm going to show you how to
connect them both. Yeah.
Switch your roonies.
I love it.
On Instagram, an incredible career, a lot of beautiful images out there. A lot of them have been in Overland Journal, and they're going to continue there. You're going to see his art and his incredible writing here in the next couple issues as well. So Bruce, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks for coming.
My pleasure. And for my dancing, go right to TikTok, because that's where I keep all the dance videos. Love you guys.
Yeah, love you, Brucey. Thanks for being on the podcast. And thank you all. We love you guys too. And thank you all for listening. And we'll talk to you next time.